Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And we are about to begin the 2045 postseason. Our Buffalo Wings are in the playoffs for an 18th consecutive year. And we are the defending world champions, trying to win our fifth World Series title with this franchise. And we've never had a repeat before, so trying to do something that has not been done in Buffalo Wings history. Feel like we're in a pretty good spot. As I mentioned, we did have the best record in baseball, the only 100-win team in the majors this year. So we are going to have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And we've made some decisions on our playoff roster. Mentioned towards the end of the last episode that I was not sure whether Dashawn Seifu, in what will be his 20th and final year with Buffalo, should be on the roster and or in a starting lineup. And Not My Four-Ply and Fake Name both indicated that he probably should be on the team. And I believe one of them suggested I should be fired if I didn't have him on the roster. And when I was talking about taking him off the roster, it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek. He certainly hasn't been a great performer this year, but we are going to try to get him one for the thumb this postseason, and he's going to need to be on the playoff roster for that to happen. When I look at our team, it was also a bit short in terms of right-handed hitters, which did ultimately work in Seifu's favor, not just to make the postseason roster, but to also end up in the starting lineup against left-handed pitching. So we ended up, as we often do, going with 12 pitchers and 14 position players. So that resulted in some difficult decisions among the pitchers. We're going to go with Lance, Barajas, Coles, and Lott as our four starters. What that means is that Simeon Manelli, who had a nice year for us as a starter, is moved into the bullpen. Floyd Auclair on the team as a stopper. Kevin Hale is a lefty specialist. Luis Palencia, a middle reliever. Nate Ruckel, middle reliever. And then the three closers, our actual closer, Joe Scott, will be closing. Chris McClintock and David Rivera, who we traded for before the trade deadline, will both be working in setup roles and or middle relief roles for us. So really like what we have in terms of our pitching staff and our bullpen. But we did have some difficult decisions to make. Chris Powers and Mike Roberts, both of whom had rough seasons at the major league level, miss out on making the team. And then Joe Warner, who was our third lefty much of the year, and actually on paper had a better year than the left-handed pitcher Kevin Hale, misses the roster. Went with Hale simply because his lefty-righty splits are pretty strong. He is very tough on left-handed batters, and we don't even intend to use him in a middle or a long relief role. His primary role is going to be a specialist against left-handed batters. So those are the 12 pitchers that we will be bringing onto our playoff roster, which means we have 14 position players. No surprises with Ramirez and Ortega as our catchers. They're in a platoon. Reichert back at first base. And in his cleanup spot, Seifu, as I mentioned, will be leading off and playing DH against left-handed pitching. Ramiro Medina at second. Danny Ferguson at third. Jaheim Lawal at short. Mike Whitehead will be our utility infielder. We're going to mix and match a little bit in the outfield. Josh Porter is our right fielder, and Ishmael Velasco is our center fielder. Edgar Canales is going to be playing against right-handed pitching as a left fielder. And we have promoted a guy who was on the 40-man but has never played in the major leagues to the postseason roster. We've done this a few times in the past. Arturo Casares is going to be our left fielder and number 5 hitter against left-handed pitching. He's actually got pretty even splits between lefties and righties. But as I said, we needed another right-handed bat and think he could potentially be an excellent pinch hitter for us. Casares this past season had an absolutely ridiculous year for us. Started in high A ball, then went to double A and played 37 games in triple A. Between those 3 levels, he hit a ridiculous 69 home runs with an equally ridiculous, if I can do some simple math here, 141 runs batted in, 178 WRC plus in high A ball, 201 in double A, and 185 in triple A. As I mentioned, his ratings are, they're not pretty even, they're perfectly even. We're going to put him in the lineup against left-handed pitching, and we'll have him coming off the bench against right-handed pitching, where he could certainly be an important pinch hitter for us. But he's viewed as the number 2 prospect in baseball. This is an international free agent signing from about 4.5 years ago at this point, and he was kind of a mid-level signing. He cost us $2 million, and he has just had some incredible talent change randomness going in his favor over the last year and a half. You can see back at the beginning of the 2044 season, we thought he was a solid prospect, 55 potential contact, 60 potential power, and a 45 potential eye. His eye is still only a 45 potential, but his contact is already 60 out of 70 potential, and his home run power has just absolutely exploded as he's gotten a little bit older and presumably stronger and filled out over the past year. And it's been a meteoric rise from him in rookie ball in 2044 to be making the postseason roster for a team that is looking to repeat here in 2045. So with the decision to put Casares on to the roster, that meant that Juan Larios, left-handed hitter, was the odd man out. He put up a 115 WRC plus for us at the major league level in the 281 at-bats that he had this year. We, as we've talked about in previous episodes, all of a sudden have an absolute embarrassment of riches at the outfield position. May need to trade away some pretty good players this offseason. But Larios ends up missing out on being on the roster. And Jamari Habersham, who we picked up when we traded away Luis Comaduran several months ago, was in our starting lineup most of the last couple months, was not incredibly productive. So he's going to be on the bench. So he will be potentially a solid left-handed pinch hitter for us. Not going to draw many walks and not going to hit many home runs. But with that 70 contact, 70 gap power, 70 avoid strikeouts, and 70 speed, he definitely is a guy who is as likely as almost anyone in baseball to put the ball in play and put some pressure onto the defenders if we do need him in a pinch hitting role. Mike Whitehead, as I mentioned, is going to be our utility infielder. He was our starting shortstop for much of this year. 93 WRC plus, a solid offensive season and a 2 WAR, but he is not as good defensively as Jaheim Lawal, who we picked up before the trade deadline. We had thought that Damani Essien was going to be our starting shortstop this year. He ended up playing just a little over a dozen games for us, 3 different stints on the IL, and he is currently out for about 4 weeks, so I think it's pretty unlikely that he will be back, which means mainly Lawal and possibly Whitehead at times will be our shortstops throughout the playoffs. With the moves that we've made, feel like this team is built to win now. You never want to say that a season is a failure if you don't win a championship, but I feel like everything is stacked up for this team to do really well this year, and certainly will be disappointing if we don't celebrate a repeat in about a month. And the 4 division winners aren't going to have as huge an advantage as we would normally have, as all 4 of the wild card series were 2-0 sweeps, so nobody had to go to a game 3. Certainly would prefer to be fully rested, as we, the Giants, the Royals, and the Guardians are. But we'll be going up against a divisional rival, the Braves. They finished 3rd in the division at 91-71. We're 9 games behind us. But we only barely took the season series against them, 7 wins and 6 losses. We have a very powerful lineup and a very powerful pitching staff, ranked 1st in the National League in both runs scored and runs allowed. The Braves were a middle-of-the-pack offensive team, ranking 7th in runs scored, and a pretty good pitching staff, ranking 4th in the National League in runs allowed. Our potential Cy Young Award winner, Jim Lance, who led the league in wins, ERA, BABIP, WHIP for the 3rd straight year, walks per 9 innings, FIP minus, and WAR, will be on the mound. The 27-year-old still, somewhat surprisingly, has never even been selected for an all-star game, but he's been a part of 2 world championship teams already, and should be a strong contender for the Cy Young Award this year, and hopefully will be a strong contender for winning a 3rd World Series championship. And we'll be going up against our old buddy, Ali Ostendorf, a guy who we selected in the draft many moons ago, the number 2 pick overall back in 2027. So 18 virtual years ago, we made Ali Ostendorf the 2nd pick in the draft. We ended up trading him away to the Braves, and he has had a nice career in Atlanta. 101 ERA plus, 98 FIP minus, been a little better than league average in those, and has put up a WAR of close to 30 over the course of his career. Led the league in losses a couple of times, but still a pretty solid pitcher. Certainly would hope that we get the series off to a good start, though. Would love to get a W here against Ali, because the fact that they must have used Marquis Bethea, which you would think that they would, their ace in the wild card series, gives us a bit of an advantage to be facing Ostendorf and then Ishmael Benavides in these first 2 games at home. So let's see if we can get this series and this playoffs off to a good start. These 5-game divisional series can be over very quickly if you don't get lucky. And we do get a 6-3 win in Game 1. Looks like it went into the bullpen. Our stopper, Auclair, got the win. Our closer, Scott, got the save. Braves jumped out to a 3-0 lead after 6 innings. We chipped back with 2 in the 7th and then scored 4 in the bottom of the 8th to open things up. Looking at the roster, big hit by Mike Whitehead, who came on for Boston at DH. I wonder if there was a injury there, or it was just that we wanted a right-handed bat as a pinch hitter. But Whitehead, 2 for 2 with a couple of ribbies. 2-run single was one of the big blows there in the 8th inning as we took the lead. Lance was respectable, 5 1/3 innings pitched, 2 earned runs allowed. Ostendorf went 4 2/3 innings, no runs allowed, but got pulled after 85 pitches. Auclair with the W and Scott with the save, as we talked about, combined for 3 innings of 1-hit relief. Looks like McClintock with a bit of a rough outing there, but no harm, no foul, as our Buffalo Wings take a 1-0 lead in this National League Division Series. So we will move on to game number 2. And Alexis Barajas, our longtime ace, perennial all-star, was an all-star this year, won a Cy Young Award 9 years ago, 12-9 this year with a 3.48 ERA, 4.1 WAR, a typical good, solid Alexis Barajas season. He'll be turning 37 years old in a little less than 2 weeks, going up against Ishmael Benavides, a lefty. So that means Dashawn Seifu will have at least one more start at home in Buffalo today for the home fans to cheer him and potentially send him off. Benavides, really into good stuff, throws close to 100 miles an hour. His control not always perfect, 6-6 with a 3.99 ERA this year. It will also, as I mentioned, be the major league debut of Mr. Casares, who we promoted onto the playoff roster despite having no major league experience. And unfortunately, a 5-4 loss for us today. So the Braves have seized home field advantage from us. Our stopper, Eau Claire, gets the loss. Did get homers from Porter and Reichert, but as I mentioned, these divisional series can turn real quickly, and this one looks like it did. We had a 4-1 lead heading into the 6th, and then they jumped on us for 4 runs in the 7th. A bases-clearing double off of Ruckel by Barnes, the big blow. Seifu 1 for 2 with a run scored before he was pinch hit for. Casares went 1 for 4, making his major league debut. McClintock with the hold. Claire was not good, and then Ruckel obviously gave up a big hit that presumably allowed some runs that Eau Claire was responsible for to score. So McClintock and Eau Claire with some pretty bad stats through these first couple of games of the playoffs. And Barajas did a nice job. 1 hit, 1 run and 7 strikeouts over 5 2/3 innings. He gets named the player of the game, but unfortunately the bullpen failed. And what that means is it's a 3-game series at this point, and Atlanta has seized the home field advantage from our Buffalo Wings. And now that Atlanta's back to the pitchers that they used in the first round wildcard series, the pitching matchups looking a little bit less favorable for us now. We do have Jim Coles on the mound. The 25-year-old rookie went 15-6 with a 3.50 ERA this year, but he'll be making his postseason debut, so he certainly could have some jitters. Going up against Marquis Bethea, a 2-time All-Star, 13-6 with a glittering 2.30 ERA, 233 strikeouts, and a 5.4 WAR this year. Another left-handed pitcher on the mound. He's got an incredible fastball and a very good sinker. Hopefully we get one of these next two, because if we don't get one of these next two, our season will be over. And unfortunately, we've got our backs against the wall. Joe Scott looks like our closer blew it. So our excellent bullpen and Eau Claire, who was an all-star this year, and Scott, who's a multiple-time Mariano Rivera Award winner, have taken the losses in the last 2 games for us. We were down early, quite honestly. We were down 4-1 after 5 innings. We erupted in the 8th, Seifu with a single and Medina with a 2-run single for 5 runs to take a 6-4 lead into the bottom of the 9th, and a walk-off grand slam for Hagen against Joe Scott. So does not get any worse than that. Seifu 2 for 4 with a couple of runs scored. He's hitting .500 in the 2 games he's played in the playoffs. Casares, the youngster, 0 for 4. Seifu with a couple of steals, so he's been productive. Coles was not good, and Scott brutal. So between Claire, McClintock, and Scott, the three top arms out of our bullpen, have all had pretty rough overall playoff performances so far. And the 100-win Buffalo Wings, who are seeking a repeat, seeking a fifth World Series championship, are now up against the wall here. Need to win 2 in a row, including today in Atlanta. We've got a 17-game winner, Chris Lott, on the mound, but 17-11 with a 4.20 ERA. He was not a dominant pitcher, but he is a good, solid major league pitcher, recently turned 27 years old. We're going to be going up against Jesus Fierro, another left-hander. 16-6 with a 3.39 ERA, ground ball pitcher who throws in the mid to high 90s. Would think that the pitching matchup does favor Atlanta, and they are home today. So it is conceivable that everything ends right here. And a 1-0 victory for Buffalo, though, so we live to fight another day. Lott outpitched Fierro. Scott got the save, and the home run was from the rookie who has never played in the major leagues until these playoffs, Arturo Casares. Can't write it up any better than that for him. A solo homer in the 7th inning accounts for the only run of the game. Seifu 0 for 3 today. Casares 1 for 4. So the home run in the 7th was his only hit of the day. Only 6 hits for us, only 5 hits for Atlanta, so it was a great pitching matchup. Lott, 4 hits, 2 walks over 7 2/3, and Scott came on to pitch an inning and a third for the save. Fierro was really good, 6 hits, no walks, 9 strikeouts over 7 1/3. The solo home run by Mr. Casares was the difference, and we will be heading back to Buffalo for game number 5. Back to the matchup we had. Actually, it's not the matchup we had in the first game. Ishmael Benavides, I believe, pitched in the second game, so they're moving him up. I guess, yeah, even with the days off, he's on normal rest. So, because there's 2 games, and then there were a day off before Game 3 and a day off after Game 4. So he is on normal rest. They're skipping over Ali Ostendorf, so it's not a rematch of Game 1. We've got our ace, Jim Lance, on the mound. They've got the youngster, Ishmael Benavides, on the mound. It all comes down to this, game number 5, a decisive game 5. And if you look around the divisional series, every single divisional series is headed to a decisive 5th game. And we get a 4-0 victory. Lance out pitches Benavides. After we fell behind 2-1 in the series, we never allowed a run over the final, I'm guessing, 17 innings that our pitchers pitched against Atlanta. So, sigh of relief for the Buffalo Wings. Homer from Porter and a homer from Reichert today, and obviously Lance out pitches Benavides. Taking a look at the box score, got a run in the second on a double from our catcher Juan Ramirez. In the 4th, a solo homer from Reichert. And in the 5th, run-scoring double from Ramiro Medina. Danny Ferguson, a name that we haven't mentioned, the third baseman, ended up being named the World Series MVP. Ferguson today was 3 for 4 with a run scored, did hit over 500. Only one ribby, so not a ton of driving in runs, but he got the award. Seifu 1 for 3 today with all the lefties we played. A lot more action than expected for Mr. Seifu. Casares 0 for 3 today, but did have that big blow last game. Lance 3 hits, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts over 5 1/3 innings, and then McClintock, Claire, and Ruckel combined for 3 2/3 innings of 1 hit, no walk, no run relief with 5 strikeouts. Don't see Joe Scott today, but we've got the W. Jim Lance is the player of the game, and the Braves made it very interesting for us. But when all was said and done, our Buffalo Wings are off to another National League Championship Series. And as I mentioned, every divisional series went to 5 games after every wild card series was a sweep. And we had 2 upsets. We are the favorites, NL East winners, and we'll be facing off against the Washington Nationals, who were chasing us for the division all year long. We ended up beating them by 8 games, but they had the 3rd best record in baseball, I believe only a game worse than San Francisco, the NL West champions, and the Nationals upended them 3-2. So it'll be a couple of NL East teams battling in the NLCS. Over in the American League Championship Series, the AL West champion Kansas City Royals did take out the Tigers, but the Toronto Blue Jays upset the Cleveland Guardians, who had the 2nd most wins in baseball behind only us, a 98-win team. The Blue Jays win an upset, and here in 2045, 60 years after the 1985 American League Championship Series matchup between the Blue Jays and the Royals, those teams will be facing off once again. Don't know if the Royals have a Brett Saberhagen and a George Brett to guide them to victory this year. And similar to our series against the Braves, it's a pretty close matchup on paper. Same as with Atlanta. We took 7 out of 13 games against Washington this year. Their offense ranked 3rd in the National League, so a much better offense than the Braves bought, and their pitching staff ranks 5th in runs against, so a good solid pitching staff. As I mentioned, we outlasted the Nationals by 8 games in the National League East this year. We took 3 out of 4 against them the final week of the season to ultimately clinch the division. But because we took 3 out of 4 against them, that means we did have a losing record against them until that final week of the season. So it should be an interesting matchup. We've got the old reliable Alexis Barajas, who along with Dashawn Seifu is the only player that's been on all 4 of our World Championship teams on the mound for us. Going up against another lefty, Brad White, the 25-year-old, 10-10 with a 3.03 ERA this year. Good solid pitcher and another lefty. So Seifu is seeing a lot more action in this postseason than we expected, and the youngster Casares getting some surprising playing time as well. And we get a 2-1 win in game number 1 in 12 innings. David Rivera, who we picked up before the trade deadline, reunited with him, got the win in relief. Catcher Juan Ramirez, who has been playing more often. Ortega, the catcher, was a big acquisition for us before the trade deadline, but he is only playing against right-handed pitching, and we haven't played a lot of right-handed pitching so far in the playoffs. We scored a run in the 3rd. They came back in the 7th with Zaire Sweeper, a run-scoring single off of Eau Claire, and Mike Whitehead in the 12th inning, a run-scoring single for the utility infielder who was our starting shortstop much of the year. A couple hits from Seifu and a couple hits from Casares. So 2 guys whose spots on the postseason roster and in the starting lineup were somewhat tenuous, combined for 4 of our 10 hits today. Also got 2 hits from Whitehead, who took over at shortstop for Lawal after we pinch hit for him with the usual starting catcher, Luis Ortega. Double for Seifu, who is having a really nice run in the playoffs for us, somewhat surprisingly. Barajas just 1 hit and 7 strikeouts over 5 2/3 innings. Eau Claire, as we talked about, gave up the lone run. After that, though, we got 5 innings of scoreless release from Ruckel, Scott, and eventually Rivera. So we emptied out our bullpen, used 6 pitchers overall to get the W. Washington only used 3 pitchers, so they'll probably be a bit better rested for game 2. But we are up 1-0 in the series, and getting each W is the most important thing. We'll deal with tomorrow. And now tomorrow is today. Jim Coles back on the mound, 15-6, 3.50 ERA for the rookie, going up against Luis Miranda, 31-year-old, 10-4 with a 3.46 ERA, has an incredible changeup, a really good splitter, and a really good fastball. Good solid pitcher. Finally back to facing a right-hander here in Game 2. Hopefully we can do better than we did in the Atlanta series and win Game 2 and go on the road with a lead rather than tied up. And we will be heading to Washington up 2-0. Coles outpitched Miranda. Scott got the save, got a home run from Ishmael Velasco. He's been the MVP of each of our last 2 World Series, so he may be heating up just in time for late October. Got a run in the first, a run in the 6th, and then 2 in the 7th. They did score their 1 run in the 7th on a solo home run by Soto. That was obviously the only run allowed by Coles. A couple of hits for Canales, a couple of hits for Ramiro Medina, and a lot of running. Canales, Porter, Medina, and Lawal, all with stolen bases. 3 hits, 1 earned run allowed for Coles. Eau Claire and Scott combined for 3 no-hit innings, allowing just 1 walk to close things out for us. Their right fielder, Mike Matthews, injured while throwing the ball, only day-to-day with a sore thumb, so that does not seem to be a major injury. So we've got a 2-0 lead as we head to Washington, which is exactly what we hoped for and wanted. Can't get any better than that when you play the first 2 games of the series at home. International amateur free agent class is out there today. I'll take a look at that after the NLCS, but we won't spend a lot of time talking about that until the next episode. But right now our goal is to get through the NLCS as quickly as possible. Got a 2-0 lead, as I mentioned, so maybe the Nationals are feeling a bit of pressure. Jesus Ramirez, excellent 26-year-old, split the year between Baltimore and Washington, a 26-year-old pitcher that was traded in July, combined for a 12-16 record between the 2 teams, 5.86 ERA after Washington picked him up. But on paper, he looks like a pretty good pitcher. Has a 6-pitch arsenal, 5 of which are above major league average pitches, plus stuff, really good movement, really good control, throws in the mid to high 90s. He's durable. Wonder what they had to give up to pick him up. Starting pitcher Chris Gosa, 23-year-old with some pretty good potential. Catcher Chris Rice, a good, solid backup catcher. And third baseman Brad Gwaltney, who's more of a replacement level type player, if that. But they had to give up a good, solid major league catcher and a guy who looks like he could be a pretty good major league starter. But Jesus Ramirez is already a pretty good major league starter. So tough pitching matchup for us today with Lott against Ramirez. And the Nationals bounce back to win it. Another loss in relief for Scott. Velasco with a home run. They got home runs from Alejandro Del Rio and Shonan Tanaka. We took a 1-0 lead in the third. They bounced back with 3 in the fourth. Big double by Matthews. We tied it up in the fifth and took a lead in the sixth, and then gave up a run in the bottom of the ninth to tie it, and a run in the bottom of the 10th to lose it. Del Rio with a solo home run off of Scott in the ninth. Tanaka with a solo home run off of Scott in the 10th for Del Rio, in the ninth for Tanaka. So your closer gives up a couple of solo home runs, and he's blown his second save of the playoffs and lost his second game of the playoffs. McClintock pitching a little better with his fourth hold, and Auclair is getting his ERA down to the respectable range. Got a quality start, 3 earned runs over 6 innings, but it was not enough. Ramirez scattered 10 hits and a walk over 7 innings, 4 earned runs, 8 strikeouts. He was not incredible, but he got the W, and Joe Scott has not been incredible in these playoffs so far. It's been feast or famine. He's blown a couple of saves and lost a couple of games, and he's closed out a couple of games as well. So see what happens here in Game 4. We finally got our ace back on the mound, Jim Lance, and we're going against a familiar name, 38-year-old Juan Estrada, the two-way player who spent the first half of his career with us, 15-10 with a 3.48 ERA this year. At the plate, Mr. Estrada hit 269 and 279 at-bats. Looked like he is getting less action at the plate than he has basically since he was 26 years old with us back in 2033 when he had some injuries. So Estrada, in terms of his batting rating, still a decent contact hitter, still can draw some walks. And another lefty that we will be facing here in game number 4. And Washington beats us again, 7-2. Another loss for the bullpen. Auclair takes the loss. And once again, similar to the Atlanta series, we're all tied up, and it is now a 3-game series. Need to take 2 out of 3. Washington jumped out with 2 runs in the third. Seifu with an RBI double in the 6th closed the gap. And then Ramirez with an RBI double in the top of the 7th tied things up. But they erupted for 4 runs in the bottom of the 7th, including a 3-run home run from Mike Matthews to tie everything up. 8 hits for us, 8 hits for them. But they got the big hits when they needed them, including the home runs. Lance did his job, 5 hits, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts, 2 earned runs over 6 innings. Rough outing for Auclair. He loses his second game of the playoffs. So 4 losses in the playoffs between Auclair and Scott. Those are the 4 losses that we've had. 2 in the first series and then 2 in this series. So kind of disappointing that the top 2 relievers out of our bullpen have combined for 4 losses through these first 2 series. But we're still even, and we still will ultimately have home field advantage since 2 of the next 3 games, if necessary, will be played in Buffalo. Our goal is certainly to go home to Buffalo with the lead, and we only needed to win 1 out of 3 to do that. But now we have to win 1 out of 1. The veteran Barajas on the mound for us. Brad White, the 25-year-old, on the mound for Washington. And we do get a 5-1 victory. Barajas outpitches White. McClintock with the save. Casares with a homer and Ramirez with a homer. Taking a look at the box score, we had 3 runs in the second. Added another in the 4th on a solo homer from Casares, 3-run homer from Ramirez in the 2nd, and added another run in the 6th. Seifu 0 for 4 today. Casares a monster game, 3 for 4, 2 runs scored, 2 ribbies in the homer, and Ramirez 1 for 3 with the big blast. Casares with his first stolen base. Barajas 4 hits, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts over 5 innings. Rivera, Hale, and McClintock combined for the last 4 innings of scoreless relief. Casares named player of the game. And we will be taking a 3-2 lead home to Buffalo. And getting ready for game number 6. We don't want to look ahead, but we do see here that the Blue Jays got some revenge for 1985 and took out the Royals in 5 games in the ALCS. So would certainly be nice to get a W here today and not have to go all the way to a game 7. But certainly the goal is to just get this team to a World Series. So as long as we get to the World Series, we won't complain, but would certainly love to get the W today. Jim Coles, the rookie on the mound for us. It'll be his 3rd start of the postseason. Josh Horton, right-hander on the mound, 11-7 with a 4.32 ERA. Throws in triple digits, so he throws pretty hard, has an outstanding fastball. We'll see what can happen. Would love to avoid a deciding Game 7 this series, and would like to avoid going to a deciding game for a second consecutive series. Can we make that happen? We do make it happen with an 8-2 victory. Coles gets the win. Horton takes the loss. They got solo homers from Sweeper and White. Luis Ortega with his first home run of the series. Josh Porter, Danny Ferguson, and Jim Reichert, all with home runs. And the rookie Arturo Casares, who has never had a regular season major league at-bat, is named the NLCS MVP. So a couple youngsters, Ferguson and Casares, winning the first 2 MVP awards from our first 2 series. Take a look at the box score. We scored 2 in the first on a 2-run homer by Porter, 4 in the fourth with 2-run home runs from Ortega and Ferguson to break things open. Added a couple more in the 5th. And our Buffalo Wings are past the National League Championship Series, which has oftentimes in this playthrough been our nemesis. We are on our way to our 5th World Series. We've won the first 4 that we participated in. And as I talked about, we're 4 wins away from getting the first repeat in this playthrough. Casares MVP hit .429 with a homer, 2 ribbies, 2 runs scored. Couple hits today from both Porter and Ortega. Porter, Reichert, Ortega, and Ferguson all had 2 runs batted in. Stolen base for Velasco. Coles, excellent. 3 hits, no walks, 7 strikeouts, and 2 earned runs over 7 innings. Palencia came on and allowed 1 walk over the final 2 innings to close things out. So our Buffalo Wings are off to a World Series. And as I mentioned, we are 4 wins away from that elusive repeat. And as we get ready for the World Series, Buffalo versus Toronto. So don't need to be flying between those 2 destinations, although they're in different countries, just a couple hours away between the stadiums. So pretty easy travel for these series. The Blue Jays have had a really good run through the playoffs, swept the Twins, took out the 98-win Guardians, and then they just dominated that series against the AL West winning Kansas City Royals. And the Blue Jays actually took the season series against us. We only played once, and they took 2 out of 3. 90-win team, so a good solid year for the Blue Jays. 10th in the American League in runs scored, but they have a very good pitching staff, ranking 3rd in runs against. There was a pretty long break between the series, so that's positive for us and positive for the Blue Jays. Everyone's rotations are set up the way they want them for this potential 7-game series. We have the possible Cy Young Award winner in the American League, Jim Lance, on the mound. Angelo Salazar will be on the mound for the Blue Jays, two-time All-Star, the 35-year-old, 6-3 this year with a 1.90 ERA. Guessing he may have had some injury issues this year. Yeah, strained hamstring kept him out for a couple of months, and then he also had a strained oblique, which kept him out about a month. But he was obviously very effective with that 1.90 ERA when he was on the mound. Incredible movement on his pitches, extreme ground ball tendencies. Only gave up 4 home runs in 90 innings pitched this year. So it looks like it is going to be a good pitching matchup here in game number 1. We'll see if Buffalo can get a W here today. Unfortunately, not to be the case. Lance takes the loss, a 4-3 loss for us. So definitely not optimal to lose when your ace is on the mound, but those are the breaks. They scored a couple in the first, added a run in the third. Bottom of the third, we had a run-scoring double from Canales, but they took a 2-run lead in the fifth. We chipped at it with a run-scoring single from Porter in the bottom of the fifth, but after that there was no more runs to be scored. A couple of hits from Velasco and Canales at the top of the order, but only 3 more hits from the rest of our lineup. Salazar gets the W, quality start for him. Lance, his roughest outing of the playoffs, 4 hits, 2 walks, 3 earned runs over 4 2/3 innings. Rivera, Auclair, Hale, and Scott all used in relief, but we are down 1-0, and we've lost the first game at home. Damani Essien now eligible to come off of the IL. That's sometimes the problem of just kind of running through these series quickly, just to kind of keep the momentum going, because I had actually thought to myself that I wanted to check what was going on with Essien and how far away he was from being able to get on to the roster. If I had known he was a game away, probably would have put him onto the roster for Mr. Whitehead. That is my ignorance or my delinquency for just kind of running through the episode and trying to build momentum for these playoffs. Essien, we had intended to be our shortstop this year. As I mentioned, 3 serious injuries, only had 43 at-bats. He did hit .326 in those 43 at-bats. Very good defensive shortstop. Would have loved to have him in there. Part of me says, hey, you've got Commissioner Powers, and if you had looked at it, you would have put him onto the team. But I didn't look at it because sometimes when I'm playing these games, like I said, I just don't pause. I just kind of run through the playoffs, and what happens, happens. And Whitehead actually did play in this game. Looks like he came in and played second base for Medina after Casares pinch hit for him. Whitehead with a 1,000 batting average in the playoffs thus far. Very limited action, but he's done a good job. So, unfortunately, we will be without Damani Essien the rest of this World Series. Pressure on us for game number 2. We've got the wily veteran Barajas, who recently turned 37 years old, on the mound, going up against Jonathan Chapman, a 32-year-old with really good stuff, really good control. He does, however, not have great movement, and he's led the American League in home runs allowed 2 of the last 3 years. Overall, 12-13 with a 4.12 ERA. although Chapman is a 5-time All-Star with 3 consecutive road games coming up after today. Feels pretty close to a must-win for the Buffalo Wings. And unfortunately, we are now down 2-0. Barajas takes the loss, so losses for our number 1 and number 2 starters in back-to-back games. We scored 2 in the first to jump out to the lead, but they got 4 in the third. A run-scoring double from Polite, Hornby with a 2-run triple, and then Jenkins brought him in with a ribby. 3 hits for Velasco, 2 hits for Porter. That's really about it for our offense. Barajas, rough outing. Kind of the worst outings of the playoffs for Lance and Barajas in back-to-back games to start the World Series. 7 hits, 1 walk, 4 earned runs over 4 1/3 innings. We'll see if we can stabilize things, but we're going to need to. Yes, I know Damani Essien is eligible to come off of the IL. Unfortunately, I can't put him onto the playoff roster. We will see if we can get some momentum going today in Toronto, because we're going to have to win at least 2 games on the road to ensure that there will be another game this season in Buffalo and another game for Dashawn Seifu in front of the home fans in Buffalo. Fortunately, it is close, so the fans can travel and try to take over what used to be known as Skydome in Toronto. Jim Coles, the rookie, on the mound for us with a lot of pressure, going up against Gil Helbhuber, Javelin Helbhuber, 16-6 with a 3.18 ERA. Good solid pitcher with a 6-pitch arsenal, including an excellent fastball and sinker. We do get a 7-1 victory. Palencia gets the win in relief. Ruckel with a save. Home runs from Tim Boston, who's been pretty quiet through these playoffs, and Jim Reichert. Taking a look at the box score, scored a run in the second, 3 in the fourth, and then 3 in the ninth to break things open. 3-run home runs from both Boston and Reichert were the big blows. Held Toronto to just 2 hits on the day. Coles, 4 innings pitched, no hits allowed. And then we used 6 relievers after Coles to get us the final 15 outs of the game. Weird outing for Coles, no hits allowed, but 5 walks and still allowed 1 earned run. So it wasn't a perfect outing, but we've got the W. And as I mentioned, we're going to need to get at least 1 more W in Toronto to get this series back to Buffalo. Chris Lott, who's been good these playoffs, coming off of a 17-win season on the mound for us. Tim DeMont, right-hander, 32-year-old, 10-12 with a 3.52 ERA. Good, solid major league pitcher, but it feels like this could be an opportunity for us. And we do get a 2-1 victory. McClintock with the W, Scott with the save. We've knotted things up, and for a 3rd consecutive series, it is now a best-of-3 series. Porter with a home run for us. Taking a look at the box score, Toronto took the lead in the 4th, run in the 7th, double by the catcher Ortega. I don't know if that was an RBI double. No, he ended up scoring a run. And then Porter with a solo homer in the top of the 9th to give us the lead. Scott came on and got the save. So a nice outing from Lott. McClintock and Scott combined for 3 innings of hitless relief. Scott with his 4th save, McClintock with his first W of the series. And as I mentioned, we are in a best-of-3 series now for the World Series championship. Rematch of game number 1, Lance versus Salazar. Would love to have a big game from Lance today. And we do get an 8-3 win. Lance not involved in the decision. Rivera with the W in relief. Scott takes the loss. I guess they've got a pitcher with the same initials as our closer. I was confused by that for a second. But the home team has not won yet in this series. So that is maybe a troubling fact for us as we head back to Buffalo, but certainly surprised and pleased that we are heading back with a 3-2 lead after heading to Toronto down 2-0. Homer from Porter and a home run from Velasco. As I mentioned, he's won the World Series MVP in each of our last 2 World Series. Maybe he will be involved again today. Toronto jumped out to a 2-1 lead after the first inning. We took the lead in the third. They tied it up in the fifth, and then 3 runs in the seventh and 2 in the eighth. Velasco with a solo homer, Medina with a run-scoring single. Overall, Velasco 4 for 5 with 4 runs scored and a ribby, 4 runs driven in for Porter. Canales, a couple runs scored and 3 hits, so 17 hits overall for Buffalo. We're pitching really well these last couple games. Look at all of the doubles we had. Reichert, I think that's the second straight game that he's made an error, so that is certainly not optimal. Their starter, Salazar, was injured while pitching. Velasco ties the NFL playoff game record with his 4-run performance. Lance was not great, but Rivera came on to get the save. And the last 4 1/3 innings, hitless, walkless, scoreless relief from Rivera, Auclair, and Palencia. The bullpen will get a day off tomorrow before we head to Buffalo and try. Oh, and I forgot, since I have been running forward, I see my negligence in real time here. I forgot to pause between the NLCS and the World Series to check in on the injuries, and we ended up missing out on Essien. And I also didn't take any time to check in on international scouting, which I intended to do. So we'll be a little bit behind the 8 ball. They probably invited the top prospects to our camp, I'm guessing. So maybe it was not, I can't even see who they actually invited, but I'm guessing it was probably the big names. Eddie Trujillo did look like he was one of the highest regarded prospects, and he was at camp. So the negligence continues by Old School Sports, but despite that negligence, we are 1 game away from a potential repeat. And we've got the crafty veteran Alexis Barajas, who opted out of his contract before this season to hit free agency potentially. We signed him for more money to bring him back for a 3 to 4 year contract in his late 30s because of how important he's been to this franchise. As I mentioned, him and Seifu are the only players who have been on all 4 World Championship Buffalo teams. Going up against Jonathan Chapman, rematch of game number 2, when Chapman outpitched Barajas here in Buffalo to earn them a 4-2 victory. See if we can turn the tables. As I mentioned, no home teams have won in this series. If we can change that today or tomorrow, we will be World Series champions. And we don't need to go to tomorrow. An 11-3 victory for the Buffalo Wings. Barajas with the W. Chapman with the loss. Got homers from Boston and Medina. And the center fielder, Ishmael Velasco, Mr. Clutch, 3 World Series championships for Buffalo in the last 5 seasons. And the young center fielder has been the most valuable player of all 3 of those World Series. Taking a look at the box score, we did give up 2 runs in the first, but came back with 3 in the second. They tied it up in the top of the 4th at 3-3, and then we really kind of started having our way with them. 3 runs in the bottom of the 4th, 2-run double from Velasco, added a run in the 5th and 3 in the 6th, and an 11-3 victory overall. Velasco 2 for 3 today with 3 runs scored, a couple of ribbies, 2 ribbies from Canales, 2 ribbies from Porter, 3 ribbies from Medina, a couple from Boston. So the offense these last few games really erupted. We out-hit Toronto 15-6 today, and reminiscent of a couple of Yankees World Series I can think of. I believe it was 1981 against the Dodgers when the Yankees jumped ahead 2-0 and then lost 4 in a row, I believe. And I believe in 1996 when the Yankees finally ended their long drought without a World Series appearance. They lost the first 2, I believe, to Atlanta before coming back to win 4 in a row. And that is what our Buffalo Wings ended up doing here. Lost the first 2 games of the series and then won 4 in a row. Velasco scoring runs like crazy. A little bit disappointing that Dashawn Seifu doesn't get into the game, especially with an 11-3 lead. In a perfect world, you would have loved to give him a cameo in front of the home fans to let them celebrate his brilliant career. But Seifu and Barajas are both now 5-time World Series champions. Barajas 5 hits, 3 earned runs over 5 innings. Rivera and Simeon Manelli combined to allow 1 hit over the last 4 innings. Tim Boston, the player of the game, but obviously there were a lot of strong candidates for player of the game today. And our Buffalo Wings have finally earned a repeat, our 5th World Series championship, and the Buffalo Wings go back to back here in 2044 and 2045. And for the 2nd consecutive season, our Buffalo Wings are World Series championships because we were World Series champions because we were facing primarily, and I think all right-handed starters in that World Series. Didn't see much of Seifu or Canales for that matter, but it was nice to see Seifu in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs actually contributing to some victories for us. 2nd consecutive title for Buffalo, 5th overall. We'll sim forward to the offseason tomorrow. Will Seifu voluntarily retire, or will we be forced to use our powers as commissioner to end his brilliant career? And I think our 889 season score is probably the lowest of any of our world championship teams, but we will certainly take it. Kind of interesting that among everyone who was on our roster this year, Seifu at minus 0.3 wins above replacement was in theory the least useful player on our entire team, but he still does earn his 5th World Series ring. Let's find out before we finish up this episode who's opted in, who's opted out, who's retired, what our budget looks like. A lot of exciting news to figure out here. And it looks like Seifu is going to retire. We've got an option year decision on Nate Ruckel. Theoretically, we've got an option year decision on Seifu, but he chose to retire. That's actually good to see. I think it was time. We'll do a full analysis of Mr. Seifu's career in our next episode. But I'm kind of glad that we didn't have to make the decision to retire him. And after a brilliant 20-year career, he made that move on his own. Option year for David Rivera. Damani Essien, who only had those 43 at-bats for us and ended up missing all of the playoffs, has opted in. We've got an option year decision on Joe Scott. Let's find out what the new budget is. My thought has been it could be cut reasonably materially based on our new ownership. However, we did just have a World Series championship winning season, and we generated a ton of revenue. And he only dinged us down a little bit. I think we were 256 before, and he's 254. So Patrick DeBonis had been opining that we might have been being a little too negative about what would happen to our budget. And at least with the big performance we had this year, not a big hit to it. So that is positive. We've retired number 19 in honor of Dashawn Seifu. 290 average, 3,229 hits, 703 doubles, 197 triples, 63 homers. Drove in 900 runs, scored 1,792 times. And, of course, he was second all-time to Rickey Henderson in career stolen bases. So Seifu retiring. Our assistant GM and our manager moving on. These were actually as delinquent as I have been in some previous episodes. We were willing to let both of these contracts expire. Nahema Rehifo had been promoted all the way from Marathon to Buffalo, so he was really a discount manager for us at $125,000. He's obviously very good. Thinking about still bringing him back, but his relationships are only average overall, and you can see with Reichert, the future of the franchise, and now three-time World Series MVP Ishmael Velasco has some tough relationships with some pretty important players. So we may look to bring him back, but I was willing to let him hit the market despite his skill, because we're likely to also have a number of minor leaguers looking for promotions, so we may be able to fill the spot that way. We also let Tiger Peterson leave as our AAA coach. The Blue Jays making a trade proposal to us, and we don't have an assistant GM to opine on it. But the season is over, and our Buffalo Wings are once again World Series champions. So we have finally gotten the repeat that we have been looking for all of these years. As I mentioned, 3 World Series titles now in the past 5 seasons. But that 889 score was easily the worst of any of our 5 World Series championships. But with back-to-back titles, 3 and 5 years, and having at the very least made the LCS each of the past 5 seasons, I think we can officially, probably for the first time ever, call the Buffalo Wings a dynasty. And Dashawn Seifu goes out in fine fashion. 2 consecutive World Series titles, although he was a much smaller part of these last 2 championships than his first 3. And as I mentioned in our next episode, we'll do a episode that just recaps Seifu's career before we do a full review of our team and our farm system and some of our former players, as we do every year, and move on with the activities of the off season. Before we do that, we will do an appreciation of Dashawn Seifu. And with less than a month until OOTP 25 is released, we've still got a fair number of seasons that we're going to need to get through to find out if and when Seifu gets into the Hall of Fame. My hope is he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but who knows? And as some of you have kind of noted, it is possible that maybe we transfer this game over to OOTP 25 and keep it going there in some capacity. Those determinations are still to be made, but Dashawn Seifu, 20-year career, was picked number 1 overall by these Buffalo Wings. The only time we ever had the first pick in the draft. His career now complete with 5 World Series championships. And we begin the clock for the Hall of Fame voting on Mr. Seifu. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.